I can't wait for you to check out this conversation with Tracy Murphy. She runs the popular blog LGBTteetotaler.com. So I want you to check that out. We're also going to go deep into her story and how her sexual orientation played into addiction and how she pulled herself out of it and what that all looked like. We're also going to talk a lot about labels. She's also going to share what she knows for sure. So check out this conversation with Tracy Murphy.
Here, we want to show you what's possible in the world of sobriety. We introduce you to the various tools, programs, and resources available, because there are way more options than you may even realize. We want you to find the one that works for you.
And we do it through people who share their pathway to recovery and will help you find your path to freedom. Because getting sober can feel hard enough. You don't have to do it alone. I'm Sarah Roberts.
And I'm Roger DeVoe, and this is Sobriety Starts Here.
Oh my goodness, I am so excited. I know I keep saying how excited I am every time I have a guest on, but I am truly so excited to sit down with Tracy Murphy today. We are going to be talking about her blog. We're going to be talking about her life. We're going to be talking about her story, and I want to get right into it. Tracy, welcome. Tell us what the name of your blog is.
Hey, Sarah. Yeah, my blog is called LGBTteetotaler.com. To take into account the queer and trans community as well as the teetotalness of it. Like I don't drink, and it's all about recovery and all different kinds of recovery.
And I love that so much because I find it such an underserved segment of the market. I mean, when we talk about this whole recovery movement, we're talking about millions of people who are seeking recovery, who are looking to get sober because it is just not serving them. And when we look at the numbers, as far as addiction goes, we know that the LGBTQIA, and I'm going to ask you for some help on some of these acronyms. We know that the numbers are showing that in these segments, there is more addiction there. So I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about that as we move through. But first and foremost, why did you start your blog and who is it for?
I started it because I realized that there is a huge need for visibility in the queer and trans community. And I'll probably just say, just upfront, just queer, and that's going to be all encompassing during the conversation, just so I'm not struggling for my words.
Mm-hmm.
But so I realized that in the community that I'm in, and I love everyone so much, but I wasn't seeing people who were like me, and I wasn't seeing people who had gone through the same things I did. And I thought, oh, well, maybe other people are looking for this too. So I just figured I would start sharing my story, and my ultimate goal was to be able to help people share their stories as well.
I find that so profound. I think it was probably Glennon who said, she posted something somewhere that was along the lines of, when you're trying to find your life purpose, find the thing that you wish were in the world, that you wish that you could connect with, and go do that thing. And it's like, that's exactly what you did. You saw that there was this hole where it was like not enough people like you were being represented and were having a voice in this space. And I'm so happy that you've occupied that space. And you've also started a new initiative called We're Here, We're Queer, which I love. And the first one just launched a couple of weeks ago. Tell us a little bit about that, that new project that you're working on.
Yeah, my ultimate goal for my blog and my site was to actually have it be more of a community endeavor. Like I really wanted people to see other people who were like them, and I'm not like everyone else in the queer community. I'm just like myself. So I want to be able to share the recovery stories of other queer and trans people in recovery, all kinds of recovery, whether it's, eating disorders or alcohol or drugs or, sexual trauma. Like these are all things that are heavily prevalent in the queer community. And I just think that seeing other people get through them is going to help other people realize that they can get through them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really interested in all different kinds of either like essays or poetry or photography, whatever it is that is easiest for you to be able to tell your story. That's what I want people to give to me, to be able to put out there for people to see.
So I think that intuitively people can understand that addiction that the numbers are showing that addiction in the queer community, it is really prevalent. And what I was going to say is I think that we can all understand that a lot of the times it's because you so often, and again, I'm struggling for my words because I want to be respectful of this conversation and of you and of the LGBTQIA community. I really mean that. And I might not always do the right thing when we're having this conversation. So I want you to help me. And I'm asking you to help me. I have gay friends. We don't talk about their gayness. we just, I have a handful of gay friends, and we just hang out. We talk to each other. We go places. We do things, and we talk about the relationships, but we don't talk about labeling and language and things I'm allowed to say. And I was reading something on your blog about, you're allowed to say the word dyke. I'm not. And I want to understand all of that stuff better. So all of that to say, I just need to kind of, make sure that everyone knows that I am coming at this from a place of a desire for deeper understanding. So that's exactly what I want to set that foundation for this conversation. So that if I don't say things right, or if I'm offensive in any way, it's by no means intentional. It's that I am trying to open up this dialogue, because I think a lot of us don't know what to say a lot of the times. We don't know how to feel. We don't know how to behave. We don't know how to act. We don't know what words to use. And we're looking to people like you who are willing to help us to do that. So what I was going to say before I went on that rant is that those numbers that are showing that addiction runs really rampant in the queer community. And I think it's because we can imagine that living in the shame of it, perhaps, or because a lot of families are not accepting, society is often not accepting, hiding behind the truth of their lives because of fear of coming out and being different. And so I imagine when I think about my own story with alcohol, it was always to try to fit in, right? Like I always felt other, and I used alcohol to fit in. And I imagine that is why we're seeing the numbers that we're seeing. So I want to get into your story. I want to talk to you because you've got kind of a unique story. I want to know about your childhood. That's one piece that I don't know much about. I've read a lot about you, but I don't know much about your childhood. I want to understand sort of how you were raised, and then how addiction came into your life, because I know you came out at the age of 16 years old. So let's kind of walk us through your story a little bit, starting from the beginning, how you were raised, when you realized that you knew that you were gay or bi, or how that all came up. I'd like to really go deep into your story if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I am from New Hampshire. I grew up about an hour north of Boston. So not like, when you think of New Hampshire, people skiing to work, like not that kind of New Hampshire, just, kind of just like a suburb of Boston. And so my family is, like I grew up Catholic, but not super religious, like just going to church, like not the heavy shame involved with a lot of Catholicism. And, it was just me, my parents, and my brother, who's 18 months younger than I am. And it was like a pretty good childhood. I mean, like my parents were young-ish when they had me, in their early 20s. So, like things weren't always like the best. Like they were working a lot to, make sure that we had what we needed, but we always did. I had my first crush on a girl when I was like in kindergarten. Like I was 5. I very clearly remember who it was. I very clearly remember like drawing, like we weren't even really super close friends. I would like draw like pictures of what I thought her house would look like weird little things like that. Because and I didn't realize it was a crush until I was older. And I was like, oh, that's what that was.
Mm-hmm. And can I ask, did you tell anybody about this, or did your family know? No. So,
no, it was just like, I didn't even like realize what that was. I just remember I invited her to my 6th birthday party and I wanted her to sit next to me. That was like the extent of it, I was very, very shy. And I still kind of, and I think looking back now, like I have social anxiety. So I think that that's what that was. So I didn't really talk a lot. I talked a lot to people who knew me, but not to like other people. So yeah. And then once I was in about junior high, like 14, I was like, oh, like I think I might like girls. But I just wrote it like in my journal. I didn't say anything. And also like I didn't actually start drinking or anything until I was 20. I was like pretty old
Yeah.
in the universe of people who get sober.
Right.
I was very old. But then at like 16, I was spending a lot of time with this one girl, and we realized and like I had a crush on her, and we were writing in notebooks back and forth to each other because that's what you did in the 90s, you guys. We didn't text. But yeah, so she wrote something like she was bisexual, and I wrote, oh, the same. And then, like we started dating immediately thereafter, basically. But
so that was your coming out. That was you telling that was the first person that you ever shared that truth with?
Yeah. And then, shortly thereafter, I realized I'm actually a lesbian. And that is how I identify now still. And the following, that was in 1997. So I was 16 years old, and Ellen DeGeneres had just come out. So
best.
I remember like watching that, like this was like, I think it was only 2 or 3 months before I came out. So I remember watching that and like just really intently watching that season of the show, season 4, because I was just like, yes, okay, this is gonna happen,
it was so good. My roommate at the time, I was living with a guy, and we were just a platonic relationship. Such a great person, and the two of us, thank God he was on my wavelength, because we taped that episode of Ellen, and it was on like VHS tapes. I'm pretty sure that's telling my age, and we watched it over and over and over again, to the point where like the tape was completely destroyed by the end of it. Like we could not get it. And I don't even really know why, like looking back, I had a couple of gay friends at the time, but it was more just her just owning it, just going for it. And then of course the backlash afterwards, it was just so sad to see her, sort of lose everything. But then of course, as the phoenix does, rise from the ashes. But yes, that was such a pivotal time. I remember that so strongly. It was so powerful when she did that. It was amazing.
Yeah, and actually, the whole series is on Hulu, so I just watched the entire series very recently, and it's still really good. I mean, I even cried during parts of it because I cry a lot. So yeah, so I did that, and then months later, I think it was into the following year, so it was like 1998, and I had been going to, there ended up being like a big group of lesbians at my high school, and we just had this like clique, and we were known as like the Rainbow Clique. And so there were just a bunch of us, and we would hang out and do stuff, and I like put a rainbow on my backpack. And then my mom sat me down one day, and I had come home from, I think, like a queer youth support group that I went to, and she was just like, Tracy, are you gay? And I was just like, I didn't know what to say. I was like, I don't know. And she was like, you don't know? She was like, I know what a rainbow is. I watch Ellen, And like that was like my coming out to my mom. And then she hugged me, and it was fine, and it was good. And she was just always very supportive. So
I'm so glad you had that support. And so that was the first time that you and your mom ever talked about it? Like that was
Yeah. We're not a big like talky family.
Okay.
So but yeah, that was the first time we ever really talked about it. And she was just always very supportive after that. So
I'm so glad that you had that, because as you know, that is not the case for so many people. And you had mentioned that you grew up Catholic, and I know for a lot of people religion plays such a huge role.
Yeah, and my dad had a little harder of a time with it because he was a more Catholic person. My mom isn't actually Catholic, so I think that might have been it. But he and I are fine now. Like it took a few years, but 20 years later, I'm not going to be upset about him for having a hard time for a few years. So.
Well, and I think that's really key. I think it's so important to kind of to understand that not everybody is going to be able to accept information as it comes in. Sometimes they need time to process, and yeah. So I think that no matter what, we just have to share our truth, and that's the key, is being able to share our truth, and then whether or not other people accept it or not, that's on them. And I think that's where I kind of want to go. I want to continue with your story. I want to, to get it to lead us all the way back to where you are now and what you're doing today. But I do want to kind of track back and talk about labels and all of that. So let's keep going with your story. So you haven't even started drinking yet. Are you doing drugs? Is there anything like that going on in your life?
I started smoking cigarettes when I was like 17. I had really so there was a lot of alcoholism on both sides of my family. And so I was very adamant when I was younger, like, I'm not going to do this. Like, I didn't want to do this. So I really stuck to that for a very long time. And it wasn't until I was 20 and I had and I was very just like, in relationships, I was like, no, you can't drink around me. We can't, it was like this thing that I was in a relationship with someone and she did not like that boundary that I had. So we had like broken up for a while. We got back together and I was like, oh, I guess, I can start to drink so that way you'll still love me, things like that. And and that's when it really started. So I was actually only, I think maybe like 8 months shy of 21, which is the drinking age here. So yeah.
And so when you started drinking, did you right away, was there a feeling with it of, a lot of people talk about when we first had that first drink, like I was 15 and for me, I tasted that. And I mean, it kind of tasted terrible, but it kind of tasted great. And more so the feeling that I had when I took in alcohol. Do you remember any of that from those first early days of drinking?
Yeah, I remember the first time I really drank was at a party at my friend's house. And, I had invited all of my friends over for this party. She and I still talk about how she didn't have anyone to really invite for a party, but she wanted to have one. So I just invited all of my friends over. And someone bought me a 6-pack of I don't know, hard lemonade or something, like Mike's Hard Lemonade or whatever it was really popular then. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it still is, who knows. But so I drank the whole 6-pack that night and I was totally fine. I was like, oh yeah, I had a buzz, but I wasn't super drunk. And I was still taking care of people who were drunk and throwing up all over the place. And I was just like, oh, this isn't so bad. I can handle it, but it was something that I still was very cautious about because of my family history. So I still didn't drink very often, I don't think, until I was probably right before I turned 22. And then the year I turned 22, I was just out, I think drinking at bars 6 or 7 nights a week. So
wow. And do you remember, so when you were growing up, so your parents made it very clear that alcoholism was in the family and they weren't drinkers, so were they really very much teaching you about the being respectful of alcohol? And then what happened when you're 22 to all of a sudden just the floodgates open and you go crazy with it?
Well, to be clear, I mean, my parents were partiers. They were into that. And the family and that's what we did when we would go to Maine on family camping trips. And that's what would happen is, there was, a bunch of pre-mixed drinks in the cooler and we as kids knew which ones we couldn't drink. So there was that. But I'm not sure exactly what happened. I think it's I had a roommate who was really into drinking and going out, and she was very encouraging of that. And then, that's what all my friends did. And their drinking culture is everywhere, but it was, in the Northeast, I feel like it's excessive in, where, especially, long winters, what else is there to do? We're kind of a small town, that sort of thing. And on top of it, gay bars were the only place you could go to meet other gay people. So I was spending time at the local gay bars. And that's what you do at a bar is you drink, especially when you're 21 and 22 years old. So yeah.
So do you feel like any part of you was ever trying to drink to escape feelings of shame around your sexual orientation, or did you not have that experience? Because I know that's the experience of a lot of gay people, but and transgender and bisexual and let's just say queer, like you said, that's going to make things
Yeah.
easier. Perfect. Do you feel like that was ever part of your story at all?
You know what? I always, and I know I have a lot of friends who that is part of their story, but I always say like I was so lucky. I was so lucky. I had, the support of, my mom and my brother, and then, eventually my father. But then also, like, I had a big group of other queer youth, like my age. And I lived in, a part of the country that was, very open and accepting. And, my grandparents were like, everyone was okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
I never really felt any shame about it.
Mm-hmm.
What I think, like, part of what led to my drinking more was also like my social anxiety, and the fact that I just often just feel like I'm not cool enough, like I don't like fit in. So that kind of like dulls that feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact that, like, just to like loosen me up so I can, meet people and like create friendships and all of that. And I mean, I had, like, I had like depression and everything. And I was, when I was younger, like a teenager, I was into self mutilation. So I would cut myself. Um, and,
And can you talk about that? Can you share with
yeah,
us where where do you feel that the depression comes from? If you think that you can talk about where it comes from, and then let's talk a little bit more about self mutilation, because I know that's piercing and also cutting, right?
yeah. So I think that, and what I've noticed as I've gotten older and I can look back and like connect it, is like I think like my hormonal changes throughout my cycle. I think that causes my depression.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
Um,
PMDD is a huge
yeah,
issue that so many women talk about PMS, and a lot of us have PMS, and that's tender breasts and feeling crappy, and having cramps and craving sugar and all of those kind of normal like breakouts, things that go on with regular PMS. But PMDD is very different from PMS, and it affects, I think, about 30%, maybe less. I can't remember. I'm not sure the numbers on it, but I just know I've looked into it a little bit, and I mean it's the real deal. It is a real situation. It's a real thing, and your hormones are definitely affected, and depression is a huge part of it. So that makes sense. So you kind of put those pieces together later on then.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, just within the past couple of years, did I realize like that's what it was. Once I took the drinking out, and I was still dealing with all of these ups and downs, and I started tracking, like, when I was feeling this way, and I finally got a PMDD diagnosis last year.
Okay.
So I've been like working on, figuring out different ways to handle that. So
While we're on this topic, only because I think it's interesting, and I think a lot
yeah.
of women that might be watching right now might be saying, okay, wait a minute, what's the deal with PMDD? So can you describe your symptoms of PMDD, and then what your doctor prescribed for you?
Yeah, so I actually, like, I have really strong like emotional responses. So I get depressed, I get anxious, I get just like overall, like, it's just this feeling inside of me, like there's a ball of anger inside of me that just really just wants to like lash out. But I mean, I don't like lashing out at people. So I just stay, like, I just kind of like keep it in. And then also I get really severe physical symptoms. So I get really bad cramps, and things like that. So it's just those two things together. And I thought that was normal for so long because nobody talks about their
Mhm.
period. Like,
Mm-mm.
nobody talks about it.
No.
So I just thought that was normal for so long. And then in the past few years, like, a few people have just been like, this is not a way that you should be living. Like, an ex-girlfriend of mine was just said, I've never seen anyone have their period like this. Like, what is going on with you?
Mm.
So I went to the doctor, and we started out with me just taking some hormonal birth control, and that helped a lot until it didn't. So I actually did some reading about CBD. So I've actually been taking CBD oil
Mm-hmm.
and adjusting my diet and my exercise to help reduce anxiety and depression. And it's only been a few weeks of that. So like, I can't say it's like great so far, but so far I'm feeling much better than I was. So
I'm so
we'll
glad
see.
you are.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you are. And I'm so glad you're exploring all sorts of different avenues. I have no judgment at all on medical marijuana, on CBD oil. I know people in my own life who have gotten rid of serious opioids to be taking CBD oil. And I mean, they're not high, they're not walking around stoned all the time. They are literally, normal people of society that are doing this so that they can get away from these really toxic chemical pharmaceutical drugs and instead take something more natural that actually works a hell of a lot better. So
Yeah.
I have no judgment on that. I try to not have judgment on anything anybody else is doing in their own life. I know that's not always easy to do because we are born to judge, but I'm really glad that you're finding something that's helping you. So anyone listening right now that is struggling with really, really bad periods, real serious bouts of depression during your period, definitely talk to your doctor and ask about PMDD and see if this might be something that you're dealing with. And I know, Tracy, you talk a lot about walking is a great way for you to deal with anxiety and cravings. And when you're feeling that desire to cut or to drink, when that craving comes up, walking has been good for you. Is that also good for PMDD?
Yeah, I use that. And it's something I discovered when I was a teenager, that just walking as fast as I can for as far as I can. And it's just like, eventually the feeling, because it is like, it's all a similar feeling to me. It's all like this like clenching and this like anger and this like fall inside of me. And eventually as I walk, it just kind of dissipates, and it's a great tool. It's just like the greatest tool I've ever come up with, because I can use it for almost anything.
And we are built to walk. We are nomadic beings. We are human bodies that are built to move. We are built to walk. Walking is all we really need. When people often ask me about building exercise programs for them and what should they do to work out and everything else, and I just say, just go for a walk. Start there. If you haven't exercised for a long time, or if you're looking to improve your health and wellness in all sorts of ways, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, get walking. So tell us what your thing is. So I know I always recommend to people, buy a good pair of running shoes. Even if you don't consider yourself a runner, get a good pair of running shoes and get out there and get walking. What do you recommend for anybody that wants to get into walking? What do they need to know? What do they need to do?
Well, what I do is, I don't even have a good pair of running shoes. Let's be honest. I am like a true lesbian, and I wear my Doc Martens. So I wear those. I have, I don't wear leather, so they're canvas, they're lightweight, but they're fashionable, and there's, a really good sole for walking. I walk, anywhere from like 2 to 8 miles a day, depending on the day. And it's all I do is, if I don't know what the weather's going to be, I bring a backpack with a raincoat. And if I do know, then I just go out on my own, and it's all I do is walk. I have a few different areas that I like to walk in, but I live in Portland, Oregon, and it's a very walkable city. There are a lot of different neighborhoods to, explore. The downtown area is really nice to walk in. So that's what I like to do, and hike.
I love it. It's
Yeah.
such when you talk about it being a tool. So what I love so much about it, it's accessible to almost everybody, other than people with mobility issues. We're talking almost everybody can throw on a pair of shoes and get out the front door. So when you say you walk as fast as you possibly can, I can't believe you do 2 to 8 miles every single day. And do you do it in the morning? Like, is it something that you do first thing when you wake up in the morning and you go, or is there a certain time? I'm just curious about this because I think a lot of people are always wondering, what do other people do to deal with cravings? And I love I got this from you, this whole walking thing, because I was reading your blog and you were talking about how it really helps when a craving comes up to cut or to drink, that this is what you do. And what I loved about your honesty about it in the first place was that a lot of us, you know, we almost act as if we don't get cravings anymore. Like once we've quit drinking, life is amazing and it's so perfect and it's unicorns and rainbows everywhere, whether or not we're queer or not. But it's like, this is kind of what we want to portray, because we want people to know how awesome a life in sobriety and recovery is. At the same time, we are still human. We still deal with these cravings and these things do come up. So I love finding anybody's tools and finding out how they really do them, how they work them. Like when people say, you know, I meditate, it's like, I want to know how you meditate. So I interviewed Holly Whitaker, and it was like, so what do you do? And she's like, I just lie on my bed. And it's like, awesome. Like, I don't have to buy the cushion and all the accoutrement. Like she was talking about, you know, the altar, and you have to have all these things. And I think she has them too, but it's like, you don't have to do all of those things. There are great ways to just use these tools in easy peasy ways. So I love what you're saying about walking. So keep going.
Yeah. So, well, one thing is that I walk as my primary form of transportation. So I just do that. I have a car, I use it sometimes, but generally where I'm going is just around the city, and I can either walk or use a combination of transit and walk. So I do that. I don't have like a set time. It's really just the walking for transportation just kind of gets my daily, like, keeps me going. And then if I have an additional like stressor that is causing me to want to check out or causing anger or depression or anxiety, my first response is to want to curl up on the couch and watch TV.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I know from experience that actually getting outside and moving my body is what makes me feel better. So I just kind of tell myself, like, okay, like you can just walk from your house to this park. And if you don't like it, you can just come back home and watch TV. Or you can walk from here to there, you know, or like you can, oh, you have something to get at the store. Like, why don't you walk from here to the store, get what you need and come back, and then you can. And it's just usually I'll want to take a longer route home or go a different way. And it really helps. And when I come home, oftentimes it's, you know, I feel much better and kind of more stabilized and normal, you know? So, yeah.
It's amazing. It's such a huge key. It's so important. In fact, Veronica Valley's Soberful program, one of the main tenets that she teaches in her program, one of the 5 pillars is movement. And she tells people, like, just go for a walk. That's all you need to do. And so many of us can find all these excuses why we don't want to hit the gym or go to this class or do all these things. And even though, like you said, we want to curl up on the couch and we want to do that so badly. And sometimes that's really good. And sometimes we need to do that. But more often than not, we're doing that instead of ever pushing ourselves to just get out there when we don't want to. Because what I know for sure is that, you know, nobody ever is upset because they've gone for a walk. No one's ever upset because they've gone to a yoga class or whatever. Like, we always feel better after movement. Like 99.9, I don't know of any cases where people feel worse after exercising or moving their bodies. It's such a great way to move the emotions through. So those feelings of depression or anxiety, or like you say, that ball of anger, like whatever it is, any of that can be moved through movement. Like, we have to move. We can't sit there with it. It really doesn't help. I mean, we talk a lot about you know, it's kind of like these opposing topics all the time. We need to sit with our feelings. We need to sit in the pain. We need to do that. That doesn't mean we don't need to do something with it. We can still be moving and moving through the pain. So I really love that you touched on that. Thank you for spending some time sharing how you use walking and movement to help move you through cravings and negative feelings, because it's huge. I think it's so important for all of us because we all deal with that stuff. So keep moving us through your story. So you're 22, you're drinking regularly, you're partying all the time, you're going to gay bars because that's where you meet other gay people. I totally get it. And by the way, I wanted to mention, I think it's awesome that you had that group in high school. That is not, I don't think, the usual case for a lot of people. A lot of people in the queer community. I don't think that maybe I'm speaking out of turn. I don't actually know, but from my experience with any of the people that I know, that wasn't the case in high school. So I'm so glad that was your experience, and that you were able to almost, you know, you weren't drinking to numb, you weren't using to numb, you weren't cutting to numb back when you were in high school. It kind of came later as you started dealing with PMDD. So I find it all really fascinating how it's all pulling together. So keep going with your story. You're 22, you're drinking all the time, you're partying. What's next?
Yeah. I also just want to say something else about the walking is, like, I don't listen to any, like, I don't wear earbuds. I don't listen to things.
Mm,
I let
mm.
myself think my feelings and like explore my surroundings and hear what's going on, because I think that's really important too. Just
I
add
think I'm really glad you did add that. I always have either a podcast or music going whenever I work out. I love to go for walks, but when I do, it's just sort of a stroll. It's not a 2 to 8 mile power walk like you're doing, which I'm inspired. I might go and do that. But typically I'm blasting music to keep me pumping and keep me going and keep me pushing. But I really like what you're saying about being out in nature, walking, hearing your own thoughts, and working through issues on your own with your own inner guidance. That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. So, as far as, I forget what the question was that you had asked me. Oh,
Just,
what was going on
yeah.
after that? Okay. So, I had started an office job at a health insurance company, and when I was 21 or 22, and I was going out all the time and sleeping in my car at lunch because I didn't get enough sleep at night, and I was smoking a pack and a half of cigarettes a day, and drinking all the time, and eating junk. So of course, I gained a ton of weight because that's what happens. And so part of that is, like, I realized, like, at that point I was like, oh, I need to not go out to the bar 6 nights a week. I need to maybe go out 3 nights a week,
Mhm.
so I cut that back a little bit, and I started, walking, and I lost a lot of weight because I, cut out some of the bad stuff, and, like, you know, some of it because I was still smoking and I was still drinking and I, doing all that. And then after that, it was still like I would still go out, a few nights a week and whatever. And, the bar I would go to, I called it my Cheers. I would walk in at, like, 11, and everyone would know me, and I would walk around and say hi to everyone. And, you know, um, and it was a great community feeling. And that is, even having that group of friends in high school, and even having the youth support group I had, that feeling of, like, walking into this bar and I'm still friends with so many of these people now. And just, like, knowing everyone and having that connection is just, it was a great feeling. So I continue to go because that's what you do when you have this group of people.
Mhm.
Um, and then I got a girlfriend and I moved to Massachusetts, so I wasn't going out to bars as much anymore because I was at home with her, and her daughter, and we would party and drink with the guys upstairs, and we would do all of that, but it wasn't as much like going out, and it wasn't as much like, it was more of like a daily calm drinker kind of thing, like
Mhm.
two or
And can I
three.
ask, was that woman your first real committed relationship?
No, no. I mean, I had. I mean, the first person. No, I was gonna say the first person I lived with, but no, because I'm a lesbian, so I've lived the U-Haul thing. I mean, it's a stereotype for a reason. Um, so yeah, she was not my first, like, committed. She was, up till that point, she was the longest relationship that I had had, but it wasn't a healthy relationship, and
Mm.
it wasn't. Yeah, it just wasn't. So, but, I would drink, like, Bud Light, or, like, have, beers or whatever, and it wasn't like a crazy thing, but it really, up to that point, like, if I wasn't going out to a bar, I usually didn't drink. But at that point is where I started drinking just at home, like, just like a daily drinker. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So she
And
and I
how,
broke.
yeah,
Oh, go
keep
ahead.
going. No, no,
No,
you go ahead. Keep going with
okay.
your, yeah, I'm loving it. Keep going. I just
Okay.
want to know how it kind of progresses
Oh,
when,
yeah.
yeah, keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. So she and I broke up, and I moved back to New Hampshire, where all my friends were, my community, and my bars. And I and you could still smoke in bars in New Hampshire at that time, but the law had changed. So I was like, okay, when the law takes effect, I'm going to quit smoking. And I basically did. And so I would just go out and I would drink, but I was still like a daily drinker at home. I would have like 1 or 2 beers when I got home, and I was still working in Massachusetts. So I was commuting round trip like 150 miles a day. Yeah, it was a lot. And, so I was just like living my life, going out, having a good time. Um, and there, like, I was not like a huge, like, people would see me as the responsible one.
Mm-hmm.
I was not like, when people think of a problem drinker, that was
Mm-hmm.
not me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then my most recent girlfriend and I got together in 2010. And, she and I both like drank a lot together and did all of that stuff. And she is still my best friend. She is my family. Like, we moved out to Oregon together, and we're still like very close. Um,
Like you're
but
still together in a relationship?
no, 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 no. We broke up like 3 years ago almost, but we're still very, very close.
Mm-hmm.
And so she actually mentioned, because we took a road trip to get out here from New Hampshire. So we spent 8 weeks on the road, just camping and staying with friends and family. Um, she mentioned before we left, like, oh, I think that on this trip, like, we should cut down on our drinking a little bit. And that was, I think, the first time that idea was like put in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and we did sort of like, we would spend, when we were in the Smoky Mountains, we spent 3 nights there and we didn't drink. We only had fizzy water. And then when we stayed at camped 3 nights at a state park in Texas, and we didn't drink. Well, we had sections where we consciously didn't drink, but we also went to New Orleans and drank a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was like a balance there.
Do you feel like when you had spent those evenings drinking fizzy water, were you wanting to drink but not drinking, or was it totally fine for you to set those boundaries?
I think it was fine to set the boundaries because I knew that it was just those few days. And, we would sit and remark like, oh, can you believe we're not drinking a beer by the fire, or things like that. But it wasn't, because it was like both of us just making this conscious decision, like, oh, for these 3 days, we're not going to drink. We would go hiking, and like camping is very physical, and we were tent camping. Like, we weren't in a trailer or anything. We weren't in cabins. So it was really nice. And that whole journey was just like one of the greatest. But we also drank plenty. Like, no, yeah, we drank plenty. And then, we got to Oregon and in July of 2013. And we were so excited because we like had this apartment downtown, and we didn't have to drive drunk anymore because we could like walk to places. And we didn't, it was just really great. And we kind of like got into a bit of a depression spiral because we didn't have jobs right away. So like we were just, going through at least a 12 pack a night of beer. I mean, because that was what we mainly drank. So it was a bit of, an issue. And then in that November, she quit drinking. So in November of 2013,
Had
she
you
stopped
two talked
drinking.
about that leading up to her quitting? Was this something that she had said she was going to do? Like, how did that happen?
It was, a little bit. She was just like, it started out with like, oh, I think I'm gonna, you know, lay off the drinking a little bit and like this, that, but it wasn't. And then eventually, it wasn't even like I don't think either one of us knows the exact date that she stopped, because it was just one of those like, okay, I'm not going to anymore. And it
Mm-hmm.
took a while to sink in for me. So like I don't remember exactly what day it was. But yeah,
Like, were you feeling like, where's my drinking buddy gone and what am I going to do? Or did this phase you at all? Like, how did it feel for you?
I was just wanted to be supportive. And I don't know that I always was, because like, but that's what I wanted.
Mm.
Um, and it never, like, I was never angry with her about it. And I was never sad to lose my drinking buddy, because I mean, we still hung out. I still drank at home. She started smoking like more weed to help her deal with that. And then she eventually stopped that too. But
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, so that was like the second thing that kind of like put it into my head. And I was just like, okay, so this is something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and then for the next year, so 2014, I just spent a lot of time thinking like, am I drinking too much? Is this too much? Should I be drinking right now? You know that
Oh,
the back
yeah.
and forth that goes in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Because she wasn't drinking, so I was more aware of when I was
Mm-hmm.
drinking.
Right.
Um, yeah, and then in early 2015, when she stopped smoking weed, I was just like, you know what? I'm sick of trying to like figure this out. I'm just gonna not drink. But it wasn't like a full like declaration of sobriety. It was just like, I'm just sick of thinking of this, so I'm not gonna do it. So I
Mm-hmm.
went like months without drinking, except at like we went to a wedding back in New England and I did the champagne toast, but that was the only thing I drank at there. Or like I went back to visit again a few months later and I had like a couple of beers with my dad, but that was it. Like it wasn't like a daily thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then she and I broke up. And then and I did a really good job of not self-medicating and numbing with alcohol during that time.
Mm-hmm.
For probably about a month. And then a friend of mine came into town. She was like, let's go out. And I was like, okay. And then, I drank. And I did the normal thing people do. They're just like, oh, I'm going to set up all these rules. Like, I'm only going to drink if I'm out at a bar.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm only going to buy like one, like 16-ounce beer to bring home. Oh, I'm only going to do, and it just kind of got back to daily drinking and
Mm-hmm.
saying every morning, like, because I knew like what I was doing. So it's like saying every morning, like, I'm not going to drink tonight. And then drinking. And then the following morning saying, like, oh, I can't believe I couldn't drink. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
like not drink.
Not drink. Yeah.
And just feel like
Yeah.
really, just really depressed or like sad that I just couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Like disappointed in yourself.
yes, that's the word I
Mm-hmm.
was looking for. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so then that friend that had come out, that had like visited me, we kind of like got into like this weird like friendship. We were like pretty like codependent, probably would be the best thing to say. She was, married to a man. I was just like, we would just like talk all the time. Um, and it was like a little flirtatious or what have you. And then she came back out and we got so drunk, so drunk. And then we hooked up. And this was in December of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't really talk about it afterwards. It wasn't planned. We didn't like plan for this to be a big whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that following January, her husband found out.
Mm-hmm.
He called me and we, like we talked about it and he and we talked about it because, and then, like she said, like, we can't be friends, we can't talk anymore. And I was like, okay.
So I have to stop you for a
Yeah.
second because that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you say that you and the husband talked about it, was he understanding in any way or was he really upset, furious? Like how did that all play out?
Oh, with me, he was very understanding. But from what I understand with her, he was very angry.
Okay.
So like, just kind of like that front of being pretty chill. Which, I mean, I wasn't in their relationship, so I don't know what their relationship was.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't, yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, so I, was a little like crushed afterwards because we were so just like codependent with each other. And I was watching that movie, Forgetting Sarah Marshall,
Yeah.
where Jason Segel goes to Hawaii to forget his actor's girlfriend that broke up with him. And I was like, oh, like, okay, I should do that. So I took a few days off of work and I went to Hawaii, I guess. And, we, so like I went there and like, and flying has never been an issue for me. Like I've never been someone who drinks while they're flying. Like I just kind of am like pretty chill about it. So it's just like, okay, like I'm not gonna like, the whole thing, like I'm not gonna drink this day and then, trying to get through it that way. So I didn't drink on the way out there. I I got to my hotel, and then I went like walking around and walking, of course. Um,
Mhm.
and I was looking for something to eat, and at the time I was mostly vegan. I say mostly because I ate eggs sometimes. So I really like everything was so fish and meat and pork heavy that I had a hard time finding something to eat. So I went into this bar and I just got some like French fries or something, and I was like, "Oh, you have Sam Adams on draft?" I was like, "I would like some of that," because that's from New England, and I couldn't get it in Portland. So
Mhm.
I only had like 2 beers. And then I went back to my hotel room and I fell asleep. And I woke up that next morning and I was like, nope, no more. I was like, I
Mhm.
can't keep doing that.
Mhm.
I didn't get like super drunk the night before. It wasn't like this big thing, but I was just done. I was just done with it. And that was my sobriety date. So January
Mhm.
28th, 2016.
What I love so much about what you're sharing is that, Jolene Park talks about gray area drinking, and that whole notion that we have to hit this major rock bottom in our lives in order to first of all realize there's a problem, and then of course to rebuild. And that is not the case for so many people, no matter what your sexual orientation, no matter what demographic, no matter where you live, what you do. It doesn't matter. We all can be on that spectrum of alcohol use disorder when it comes to having those thoughts of, okay, I'm just not going to drink today, or tomorrow, no drinking, not until the weekend when you're going out with so-and-so. And then we blow that. Or, all of these rules around it, all of these thoughts around it, all of this energy and brain power taken up thinking about drinking, thinking about not drinking, trying to figure out how we can navigate our way around keeping it in our lives. And so often, when we can finally realize that it's just not serving us in any useful way, that's when we really begin to recover. And I think that's a really powerful piece of your story, is that you had kind of gotten sober previously, where you had just stopped the drinking, but you didn't add any of those tools into your life. And I think that's so key with so many of us that, especially that have experienced relapse, where we get sober because we cut the drinking or the drugs out, but then we don't do anything else. And we just sort of feel like we are amputated and trying to just squeeze ourselves into life, and it never feels authentic. And unless and until we are able to fully embrace the wholeness of who we are and use the tools that we need to use that feel right for each of us, that's when real recovery starts to happen. And to me, I think that recovery is just simply living a really good life that I'm intended to lead, leading the life that I desire to lead, and doing the things that I choose to do with my life and with my energy. And that's why I'm so excited to sit here with you and talk to you about all of this, because you are, such an example of somebody who, you're a lesbian, you knew from a young age, you were accepted. It wasn't like, religion was pushing you down or your family was telling you not to be who you really were. And yet you can still have this kind of a relationship with alcohol where you knew it was not serving you, where you knew you had to get rid of it, or else goodness only knows where it might have led you into the future. So I think it's an important story to share. So I'm so glad that you're here to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm.
And I did and that was it. The first thing I did, because I knew I needed to tell people so I would continue to not. So from Hawaii, I texted like 2 people to let them know. So my ex, who had been sober for a few years, and one of my best friends who lives in Virginia.
So you reached out to them to say, I've quit drinking,
Yeah,
please hold me accountable.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it was very much just like, like I've stopped drinking. I can't do this anymore. This is, I just want you to know. I need people to know.
Mhm.
But yeah, and then the first few months was just more of the same. Like I didn't integrate any new tools or anything. I was searching. But it was very much like white knuckling it through. It wasn't good those first few months
Yeah.
at all. Even though I had the support of my ex and I had support of friends that I had told about it, it just wasn't good. And then one day, I was like scrolling through my Instagram, and I don't remember when I started following the Hip Sobriety Instagram account.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. I think it may have been in like 2015 when I wasn't drinking, but like I never really like saw any of it. And then one day I saw it, and Holly was doing one of her webinars to kick off her hip sobriety school. And I was like, oh yeah, like that's what I need. And I did it. And then she taught me like just how to do it.
Ah,
Yeah.
and I'm so glad that we've had her on. So anyone watching
Yeah.
this right now, after you're done watching this with Tracy, then definitely go and watch the Holly Whitaker's interview where she shares about hip sobriety school and what is entailed and what happens there. And it's not for everybody. And she makes that point in that interview. It's not going to be for everybody, and that's okay. But it's a tool. It's something. It's a program that might be exactly what you're looking for. For other people, it's Smart Recovery. Others, it's Refuge. Others, it's AA. Like, I don't really care what anybody does. I mean, honestly, that's what this whole Sobriety Starts Here is about. It's about pointing people in the direction of people who are on a journey, and sooner or later, our hope is that you will connect with somebody that's on the same kind of path. So for someone out there that's watching it, that's saying, that's kind of me. You know, first of all, I'm a gay woman, and I, dealt with depression, as a young person, and have kind of dealt with that. I had sort of that idea of gray area drinking, where it was like I never really had the falling down the stairs. I was, you were saying you were the one that was helping your friends, and they were throwing up and doing crazy things. You were the responsible one, kind of keeping everyone together. I mean, it wasn't like you have this crazy rock bottom moment, and you don't have to have that to know that you don't need to have alcohol in your life, because it's just no longer serving you. So I love that you came about it so organically and so naturally, and through the experiences of your life. And that's how it goes. That's how we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was something that helped me. And that's it. I mean, I know so many people that maybe that's not enough for them, or it's not the right thing for them, but that's what helped me. And it was really life-changing for me.
Well, because it was funny, because you were saying, it did not go well when you first got sober. And I have to say, whether or not we get into hip sobriety school, refuge recovery, AA, SMART, doesn't matter. It's not for the faint of heart. Ann Dowsett Johnston talks about that. She said in her interview that getting sober is not for the faint of heart. Those first few days are torture for so many of us. Some people have an easy time of it. I have not met that person, but I know they exist. That's for some people, like it just feels easier right away. For me, that was not the case. It was definitely it was really challenging. And I share that one of my major tools when I first got sober was non-alcoholic beer. I drank beer. And so, to the end, I was a wine and beer drinker. And I went to beer towards the end of my addiction because I could count how many I'd had. And whereas wine, it was a little bit harder. But I was a Corona drinker. And so I started buying the non-alcoholic, and it's 0% alcohol. For anyone out there who wants to say to me, well, there's still alcohol in non-alcoholic beer. Not the kind I was drinking, but I still don't care or give a shit about anybody who drinks 0.05 alcohol beer, because if they think it tastes better and they want to drink 400 of them to get any type of a buzz, it'll never happen. I have very a strong belief about that. I mean, for people who still want to have the taste of alcohol, especially, I know so many people who are gray area drinkers who are just like, I just really love the taste of it, and giving it up entirely is devastating to me. It's just like, try a non-alcoholic beer then, or wine. I mean, there are lots of things out there. Again, that is not going to be the right answer for a lot of people. People with physical dependence on alcohol often cannot even fathom the idea of a non-alcoholic, because it does smell and taste somewhat like the real thing. So all of that to just say, that was a tool in my toolbox. In those first days, I probably drank a 12-pack of non-alcoholic 0% Beck's was the brand I liked, with a lime, pretending it was Corona. I did that every day for at least a few weeks, if not a couple of months. But it got me through some of those dark, really hard times. So I agree that it is not for the faint of heart. It's not easy for anybody. And even if you get into a program early, I think that time, that early period of very early sobriety, I don't think it should be easy if it's gonna last. I don't think it should be easy if, I don't feel like I needed it to be easy. I guess that's my point here. I think I didn't need it to be easy. I needed it to be so fucking hard, because if I ever wanted to think back to to drinking again, I could always remind myself of, I know people talk about rolling the tape forward. What's going to happen if I keep going? I would roll the tape backward and think of how hard it was for me in those first few hours, days, weeks, and months. And I never wanted to go through that again. I did end up relapsing 4 years later, but for that first, that big stretch, it was like, I just didn't want to go through that again. And so for me, it was, it was all part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I drink non-alcoholic beer sometimes, and it tastes good to me now because I haven't had real beer for like 2 years. But it's
Yep.
like, every few months I'll have one, and it's good. And
Yep.
but yeah, and it's just that teaching me that those 3 months that I really didn't have any other resources, that I was kind of like searching for something, really taught me how I can like just take care of things, even if I'm not feeling good about it, even if it's like, triggering other feelings in me. Like I can get through that, and I can use my tool to walk. I walked so much,
Yeah.
and I can do these things that are really, really hard, and then I can learn ways to do them better and easier.
Mm.
But
I love
yeah.
that. So let's talk about some other tools. So of course, I know that Hip Sobriety School was a big one in your toolbox and all of the things that you learned there. So hopefully you can share some of that. And obviously walking is huge for you. You've talked about eating well and exercise, of course, and drinking water. But tell us more of your tools.
Yeah, I think that having other people for me to connect with was huge. So just reading other people's stories, because most of these connections are online for me. So just like reading other people's stories, especially when I was going through some really hard times, made it easier for me to be like, oh, like this person feels the same way I do. I'm not a freak.
Yeah.
Like I am completely normal in the situation.
Yeah.
And that alone was probably the biggest thing that helped me through, was just knowing that other people understood me and had my back and supported me.
Can I ask, is there an LGBTQIA? And I still want to ask you what the IA stands for. I didn't want to look it up on Google. I wanted to ask you what that was. And I want to talk more about labels, and we're going to get to that. I keep saying we're going to get to it, and we will. So is there an online private Facebook group like there are for I know there are lots of private Facebook groups for sober women. I don't know about one for sober men. I wish someone would start that. If you're out there watching right now and you're a guy and you're sober, start a private Facebook group. A secret, Facebook group would be awesome, so that all you guys can talk about recovery amongst yourselves. But is there one for the LGBTQ community? And if not, I really hope you start one.
There's not one that I know of. So if anyone's watching this and knows of one, let me know. But yeah, and that I think would be something that would be great, and probably something that I would love to start like down the line. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's important, because I just do think that, running Facebook groups is not easy. It takes time and effort and energy, and I totally get that. I run several, and it can be exhausting. So I get that. But I do think it's interesting when you were saying that you definitely wanted to read stories of people that sounded like you and that were like you. And let's now get into that then. So people like you. So you and I are the same because we're both women. We're both in recovery. We both use a lot of the same tools. We, have a lot of the same philosophies on life and all of that. And that's awesome. But there is this whole part of you, your sexual orientation definitely plays a huge role in who you are and how you connect with other people and how you view yourself and how you view the world. Like, tell us and help us understand how it's different for a lesbian woman versus the rest of the world in recovery, if that even is a thing.
Yeah. So let me think for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So what's different for me, and I can obviously only speak from my own experience. I just want to put that out there. I'm not speaking for any other queer person out there. But for me, I just feel like the way I interact with the world is really very informed by the fact that like I've had to protect myself from, you know, being part of a marginalized community and being part of a community that we have to worry about, you know, being targeted and beat up and killed. And, you know, like, if I'm in the middle of Oregon where it's rural, I don't hold hands with a girl, you know, and there are things that, like, I have had to deal with, that, I mean, people who are heterosexual don't have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of it, the fact that we've had to, like, fight for rights, and we've had to, like, fight to be treated as actual citizens and equal citizens of the countries that we live in, and are still doing that. Like, I'm not in any way saying that, especially in the United States, that we are equal citizens on a federal level, because we're not.
In fucking 2018, let's
Yeah.
remind people the year that it is right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, so there's all of that additional, like, stress and trauma that we have to deal with, even if, like, because I know a lot of people who are queer who say, like, that's not all I am, that doesn't make up who I am, like, it shouldn't make me any different. It's just, but it does, and it informs how you process things and how you deal with the world, whether or not you're really active in the queer community, and whether or not you are really, you know, interested in the history of the gay rights movement, or if you're, you know, if you're not interested in any of that, if you just want to be married with your kids in a house, like, it still impacts you. So I think that seeing, like, all the lovely women that I know, and there are a lot of the lovely women that I know in the communities I was already part of. There are a lot of queer women that we just weren't talking about it. And it just wasn't something that was brought up. So I think that just bringing it up, and, like, knowing, like, that every conversation isn't about dating men, and every conversation isn't about, like, heteronormative things, and every conversation isn't about, I love kids, but not all about your kids, or, like, you know what I mean? Like, having that space to talk about things that are, like, queer related, and to be further intersectional, related to, you know, people of color, because that also is a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm really interested in creating more of an intersectional recovery community that includes everyone. And that, just to be able to see that and see other people's stories, is just really what I think is going to help other queer people see that they can quit drinking and still be a part of a community. Have that feeling that I had when I walked into the bar, where I felt like, these are my people. Like, I want other people to have that without the alcohol, you know? Yeah, and just seeing someone who's like you doing something is how you can tell that you can do it yourself.
I love that you said that. And that's exactly why I wanted to have this conversation with you today, so that other people that are queer can look at this and say, oh my God, she's out there talking about this stuff, and she's sober. You know, I can do this too. I love it. I want to understand, why do we use the term queer? When and how and where and why do we use the term queer versus gay, bisexual, lesbian? What do we use? How do we do it?
So, so I'll go through first the LGBTQIA first.
Perfect.
So there are a lot of identities that are under the umbrella of queer, which queer just means different, not the norm, like the actual definition. So you know, L is lesbian, G is gay, B is bisexual, T is transgender, LGBTQ is queer, I is intersex. So someone who is intersex is someone who was born with maybe both kinds of, like, sex organs. Like, maybe you could have a penis and ovaries, or things like that, or maybe you had genitalia that you couldn't necessarily tell whether you were a boy or a girl. So the intersex community has, and I'm not intersex, I can't totally speak to it, but they have been fighting for a long time about genital reconstruction on infants because they want, like, parents and doctors want to have like normal looking genitalia, which causes a whole slew of problems. And there are a few pretty good documentaries about intersex people out there. So if you're interested, I can find the names of them for you. And then A is asexual, or it's shortened to ace a lot of the time. So if you see people say like I'm ace, that means they're asexual. And that is just when people are not, and there are varying degrees of this. So like I'm just broadly generalizing, but that's when people are just not sexually interested in people. Like a lot of asexual people have romantic connections, but not sexual connections with others, and they have partners that they are, romantically involved with, but they don't have sex. And then there are different levels of that. And there's also a really great documentary about that, which I can also give you the name of afterwards once I look it up.
Yeah, good.
So, and then I often include a plus sign at the end because it's what we call like the alphabet soup. There are so many different queer identities that some people can rattle off like 10 or 12 of them, and I can't. I'm sorry, you guys. I just can't. I don't have them all memorized in the right order. But there are a lot of different other sexualities. It's not limited to those few. And all of these are not necessarily even sexual orientations, because intersex and transgender is not a sexual orientation. That is who you are. It is, and sometimes it's biologically who you are as an intersex, and sometimes it is your gender identity, which is transgender. So that it's not all sexual orientation.
Excellent. Thank you so much for kind of breaking that down. And so I guess my next question is around labels in general. I mean, I'll use my own life as an example. So when I got sober, I refused the label of alcoholic. Like I just could not wear that. I was like, I will do anything but to call myself an alcoholic. So I hid the fact that I had any type of addiction issue. I pretended that I was into health and fitness. I told everyone that I was on a cleanse and I was getting super healthy, and that's why I was no longer drinking. And people were like, weird, but whatever. So I hid it for so long. And then finally, when I decided to come out just a few years ago, I finally kind of decided to come out publicly. It was like using the label alcoholic felt like a fuck you. Like it felt like a badass, I know there's a word I'm looking for, but it just felt like giving the middle finger to anybody that was questioning why I wasn't drinking anymore, or just giving the middle finger to just drinking culture in general, where I was just like, this is such bullshit. Like it's pushed on us in such a heavy way, and it's ruining people's lives, and the statistics are out there, and it's a fucking drug, and no one wants to talk about it that way because everybody drinks because it's legal and it's great and it's fine, and shut up. And so I used alcoholic as like a fuck you. When someone would ask, are you drinking? I was like, no, I'm an alcoholic. Okay. Like, are you good? Are we done now? And over the years, and it was funny, Holly Whitaker comes up again. And when she and Laura were doing the home podcast and really kind of talking about their views and their thoughts on the label of alcoholic, that's when I started kind of redefining it for myself, whether or not I wanted to wear that label. And so I bring that, and so now I typically don't. Like I don't typically call myself an alcoholic when I'm, it doesn't come up like that anyway, typically with people that don't know me. But normally it's, I'm a woman in recovery, I don't drink, I'm sober. That's the kind of language I like to use. So when it comes to labels, you were saying queer is sort of the opposite of everything normal or everything typical. Is that something that we should be perpetuating? Should we be ascribing these labels? Should we be putting people in boxes? Like, I just wonder if it's helping to further the cause or if it's taking us one step back. And then I also, and yet I also see how powerful it was in my own life to adopt a label and to put it on and wear it and feel it and believe it and own it. But then there was also a feeling of shedding that and removing that and feeling like that freed me in some ways. So I'd love your thoughts on labels in general. Talking about labels and how you feel they fit into the queer umbrella.
Yeah, sure. So first I want to, as you were speaking, I was realizing that I should clarify that queer as a sexual orientation is more like people who don't want to define whether or not they are attracted to men or women or trans or non-binary. It's kind of just like a catch-all where, you know, like if I identified myself as queer, then that would kind of be me saying like I could be attracted to like almost anyone, and everyone has their own individualized definition of that when they are identifying as queer. But when you talk about the queer umbrella, as you know, when I use the term queer to include LGBTQIA, like everyone together, yeah, it is kind of like a you know, like we're different than the norm, and we are. And that is, I feel like personally, not everyone does, but I feel like that's super empowering. I've been reading a lot about like the history of like the gay movement, and I say gay movement because that's what it was called then. And it was, and it's really interesting and it's really empowering to watch these documentaries and to read these books about these people who were really like really risking things just to be able to claim that they were different, and like our queerness and our difference is what makes us super special. Like I don't think I would be the person I am if I wasn't a lesbian, like if I wasn't part of the queer community.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really think that and being able to interact with all of these different kinds of people, trans people, non-binary people, gay people, queer people, pansexuals, bisexuals, everyone, like I feel like that has given me the ability to interact with everyone and give them the respect that they deserve. People deserve on an individual level. Like, even if people are doing things that I don't particularly like, I can see myself in them because I can see myself in all of these other people as well. Mm-hmm. So I feel like being queer, it's not othering. It's kind of like seeing that like you just have all this potential. All of this potential to do all of this stuff. And the queer community, and especially the queer and trans community of color, have been doing so much work for so long. And that's it. It's just so much has come of this that it's just amazing. And I love it. And not everyone's going to agree with me, but I really think that it's a great label to have. And I think it's something that we should all just like immerse ourselves in it and the history of it, learning about our past, and not just the white past, but the past of the people of color too, who dealt with this on the front line.
I really connected to what you were saying because it reminds me that whether I choose to not wear that label alcoholic and choose instead to wear the label sober or in recovery, I'm with you. I want to count myself in. I want to know right away who my brothers and sisters are. And I think that's what you're saying too with the label queer, where it just really allows you to connect with the people who are your people. And I think that's what this is all about. I think that's where labels, we talk a lot about labels, you know, in our culture. And I think that that's where labels can really do us a service, is when we can count ourselves in and when we can really connect with other people that we know are our people. And you talked about the importance of community as one of the tools in your recovery. And I think that that's another way that we can do it. And that's how you and I connected. We are connected through a group, a secret Facebook group of sober sisters. Like, that's how we know each other. And then it was just getting to know you and learning that you're a lesbian, and great, you know, that's just another piece of your story. And I mean, it's more impactful than, you know, where I live or what other, you know, other pieces of my story, but it's part of how we can connect as human beings. And also, it's not about putting people into boxes, but I think it's about exploring the the relationships in a deeper and more profound way so that we can connect more deeply and more profoundly with our brothers and sisters. I think that's where labels really can serve us as opposed to hinder us, which is, I think a lot of the time that's where the language goes. It's where it's stifling. And I think in this case, I really see the benefit and the beauty of it.
Yeah, absolutely. But then there's the other thing, the other part of it where, so we're all in this queer umbrella. And then there's like the language part of it, whereas, you know, who can say what? Like, you don't ever want to, I'm, you know, speaking to you heterosexuals right now, you don't ever want to assume anyone's sexuality. So if you know, like, you don't want to assume someone identifies as queer. You always want to make sure that it's something that is disclosed to you and not something you assume based on behaviors or how someone looks.
Mm-hmm.
So until someone discloses, whether it's, you know, overtly, like me saying, hi, I'm a lesbian, or if it's something that's more subtle, as in, you know, like, oh, like, this is my partner and we're, you know, going to this lesbian group. I don't know what the subtle thing would be.
That doesn't sound so subtle.
No, not at all. But I don't know what the subtle thing would actually be, because that kind of subtlety you would still be assuming. Like if I didn't say I was a lesbian and I introduced you to my female presenting partner, it would still be an assumption for you to say that I'm a lesbian, because I could also be bisexual. I could be queer. My partner might present as female, but maybe the partner is non-binary and uses they, them pronouns. Or maybe the partner is actually trans, just pre-transition, so they prefer the term he, she, he pronouns. So there's just like a lot of, and I know that people get annoyed because it's like, oh, it's so much work. Why can't we just say what we want? But being fully accepting and being fully inclusive should make people feel uncomfortable, because if you're not feeling uncomfortable, so if the majority isn't feeling uncomfortable about accepting what the minority wants, then like there would never have been a problem anyway, because nobody would have felt uncomfortable about it. So everyone would have just already done it.
Mm-hmm.
That discomfort is you opening up and like challenging like how you are and who you are and how you've been taught about things. So as
or
you
not
are,
taught, or not
right,
taught, right?
yes, right, or not taught. So that discomfort is your open-mindedness, like kind of opening a little more. And then once it's like more loose, like a muscle, like more built up, then you won't feel the discomfort anymore. But that first bit, that learning the right way to do it, should be uncomfortable. If you're doing it right, it should feel a little awkward, because that means you're really honoring what someone else wants and not what you want.
Okay, so I think I hear what you're saying, and I really respect what you're saying. And I also want to get clear. So if I'm somebody who is curious or wondering if a friend of mine who I've recently met is gay, is queer, let's just use that. I have no right to ask. Like I like, was that what you're saying? Is that I don't have any, it is not appropriate for me to ask about, because that's so, I mean, it's such, I know I'm asking this and I sound like a fourth grader, like, because I feel like I have done that. I feel like I did that with my, you know, with one of my girlfriends who, you know, from many years ago, who was gay. And it was like, we just had you know, I thought we were having an open conversation about it. I thought I was doing a service by like being a friend, by wanting to be open and have that conversation and let her know, like, I couldn't care less. Like, it's awesome. It's great. I'm happy for that. And I just wanted her to know that I was open and accepting, because I know so many people aren't. So is what you're saying the right way, as far as you believe, the right way to go about finding out where someone is with their sexuality, with their gender, with all of that, is to just not ask any question, is to not say anything until they approach us and tell us about it?
I think it really depends on the relationship you have with the person. Like if I just met you walking down the street and it was like our first like coffee hangout together, no, don't ask. Like just don't assume, don't ask. But if it's someone that you know, and then you could say something like, hey, like, just like say you're talking about like your boyfriend or something, be like, hey, I don't want to assume, what your sexuality is. Like, is that something, like, I don't want to assume that it's the same or different than mine. So, something like that. It's the same thing as like if you meet someone and you're just like, oh, like, what pronouns do you prefer that I use? It's just like that whole, like, just making them feel seen and heard. And then also, like, if you're at that level where it's appropriate to even talk about it, because you wanting to know does not necessarily make it appropriate. So if you're at that level with someone who you're friends with, where it's appropriate and they've been like vague, or they, play the pronoun game with, like say they have a partner and they're like, oh, my partner, and they don't necessarily say whether or not they're queer or they have a non-binary partner. If they don't say anything like that and you're close enough, like, you might want to ask, like, hey, I don't want to assume. You talk about your partner, what kind of pronouns should I use if we're talking about your part, something like that.
This totally happened in my own life. I had a friend who had a non-binary partner, and I have to tell you, I fell down all over the place. They presented as a female, the way they look, totally, you know what I mean? And so for me to remember to always use proper pronouns, it was challenging for me, but yet every time I screwed up, I would just say to them, I'm so sorry, like, bear with me, I will get this. But I think, and I hope that there is a place where there is some understanding that it isn't the typical, and we might need to take some time and effort to understand that it's not the typical, and that, do you know what I mean? Like, I needed them to cut me some slack when I just found out. And it was like, oh, because that's a really tough one, because they presented as a she, and yet I would have no idea. And I think that that's where this whole thing is just getting, it just gets complicated in a way, because we, as the general public, I don't think we're out to offend people or to say the wrong thing. And yet we can find ourselves really hurting people's feelings and fucking up everywhere. And it's not intentional. It's not intentional. And it's just because of the way, I mean, we've just been conditioned to use certain pronouns since we were little. Yeah. So it can be hard.
Yeah. And I think what's good right now is that the conversation is wider now, and people are hearing about this before they meet their first non-binary person. And it's something that we're like bringing into popular culture. And again, visibility makes it. Feeling seen makes it. So if it's something that we're talking about, visibility doesn't only help, like, non-binary visibility doesn't only help non-binary people, it helps other people be able to accept them ahead of time. So like before there were lesbian and gay characters on TV, it was more challenging to gain acceptance from friends and family and people that you meet. However, once it became more visible and people could see this and be like, oh, like, this actor I like is gay, or, this, and, trans people like Laverne Cox and, like, Chaz Bono, like, everyone gets to see this and be like, oh, okay, like, these are just regular people. So we can respect what they want. And I think that the same thing can be said for the language of non-binary people, is that, as it becomes more publicized to the general public, and they can see that non-binary people are just regular people, and there's nothing weird about them. They just use different pronouns, which are totally acceptable pronouns. And I think that is going to help. But in your situation, I mean, so the whole thing, just being honest and earnest and open to, like, so when, you meet someone and you're like, oh, okay, like, they, them pronouns. I can do that. And like, if you mess up, instead of being like, oh, and get defensive, just be like, oh, I'm so sorry, and just be honest and open about it. And then listen to what they have to say. So that's the big thing too, is just like listen to what they have to say and why they feel like they need to be seen as they are. Yeah.
I love it. I love this conversation. This was one that I've been really looking forward to because I really wanted to have a chance to delve into it a little bit deeper, and I'm glad that we did that. So I want to know: have you relapsed at all? Is your sobriety date sticking, and that's it, and you haven't had any relapses since?
Yeah, absolutely. So January 28th, 2016. So I just had my 2 year in January.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it's great. I'm just like, I'll walk by like bars now and just be like, oh God, I'm so glad I don't drink. Like I'm so, the same thing as walking by someone who is smoking a cigarette. I'm like, God, I'm so glad I don't do that anymore. Yeah, it's good.
That's funny because I quit drinking first and then quit smoking a year later. Is that how you did it too? Did you quit the drinking first?
No, I quit smoking right after my 31st birthday. So that was a little over 6 years ago. And then I'm so glad I did it this way too, because it's just, I think I'd still be smoking if I was just talking to someone about it yesterday. Like, I think that if I quit drinking first, I would still be smoking right now. So yeah.
I mean, I think it can go either way for anybody, but I love that you know that about yourself, that this was the right order for you to get things done. I love the way that you've taken control of your life, Tracy. I think you are an inspiration. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me today. I have a couple of extra questions to ask you. You've told us about the tools that you use in your recovery. I love them. I want to know, for you, what is the best thing about being sober?
Oh, knowing that all of my feelings are my actual feelings and it's not something that I'm making up in my head, and my decisions are actually being made because it's what I really want to do. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well done. Last question. I'm stealing it from Oprah. I've been teling people I'm stealing this one from Oprah. Tracy Murphy, what do you know for sure?
I know for sure that everyone deserves respect and love. Everyone. That's it. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much. Well, I love you. Thank you for being here. This was a true honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad I had a chance.
I'm so glad too. And before we leave, I almost forgot. Tell people where they can find you, where they can follow you. Where do you do most of your work?
Oh, yeah. You can find me on Instagram, and that's where I'm probably most active. And I am Murph the Jerk, because it's funny. And also, you can find me on my website, which again is LGBTTeetotaler.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for what you're doing. Continue to share those amazing stories on your blog. I love that you've started this new project with what's it called again? I wrote it down. The new series. We're here, work we're.
Yeah.
I love it. So keep going with that, because like you said, so much of the tools in your recovery are about connecting with other people who have voices and sound like you and feel like you. And I think that's such a key for people watching and listening, that so often we can feel alone, and when we can connect with other people that share our experiences, we can realize the sky's the limit. We can definitely do whatever we want to do in this life, but knowing that there are other people that have been there, it really helps ease the journey for sure.
Yeah, thank you. That's my goal.
I love it. Thank you.
Thanks.
To get access to all of the free videos and interviews, visit sobrietystartshere.com.